My name is Carolina Vibert. I am receiving my master's in classical liberal education and leadership from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. My degree focuses in classical education. Classical education is an education that looks to form the whole student, intellectual excellence and moral excellence, and it's all done through a study of the liberal arts. I have had the best mentors ever, so Colleen Sheehan and Trevor Shelley and Jack Duty. They have just taught me so much about what it means to be a principled person. Because they're classical educators, what has affected me is the way that they've loved me, the way that they've loved my family, the way that they've loved to watch me bloom. Colleen has critiqued my work, and I am a significantly better writer and better thinker. Sometimes when you don't believe that you can do it, you just need somebody else to tell you that you can do it, and she's done that for me. I hope to help schools become classical, who are interested in becoming classical. I just think that it is the move forward to help students become all that they can be. That education is something that is for you as a whole person, not just that educational side of you, but for all aspects of who you are.
In the classical tradition, to be educated was to study in an integrated, harmonious way what it means to be human. Humanitas engages students in important, universal questions that require them to think and reflect and come to their own conclusions.
To learn more, visit humanitashistory.com.
Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returneth, was not spoken of the soul.
A story can be told. A story can be told of how modern education lost its way in the purposes of intellectual and moral wisdom. I would argue that classical education is uniquely poised now to respond.
We've taken it upon ourselves to gather this big tent of classical educators from across the country to really go deeper, to understand better the tradition that we've inherited and the resources needed to sustain it.
Classical education considers knowledge, for all its uplift and liberation, to be a precursor to wisdom.
If you want to know what a school really believes, look at how the adults treat one another. Look at how they work together. Look at how they speak to one another. And look at how they have built the systems to deeply love one another where they're at.
He said, you know that you're more than a bird because God will send people to love you. And from preschool to law school, God always sent people like you to love me.
A good education is one that ultimately gives the individual an opportunity to flourish as an adult, irrespective of where life's journey takes them.
We're not just giving them knowledge either. We're also trying to develop them morally. We're trying to develop them into something other than what they are now, so that they can go out into the world later and be somebody.
I am glad for my heart. I am glad for my heart.
Our work today is to engage our time with the resources that we have, to be hopeful, forward-looking, and to know that the lessons of the past are ours to be prudently deployed for generations of students ahead. Brothers and sisters, we have an essential part to play in an unfinished history. Thank you.
In the field of classical liberal arts education, Great Hearts Academies leads the way in providing a tuition-free public education for students that is focused on the formation of their soul, their heart, and their mind. For that reason, our teachers are the most important daily leaders and shapers of intellectual and ethical culture on our campuses. The capacity of a school to offer the right kind of education, one which cultivates both the intellectual and moral virtues, comes down to the individuals at the front of the classroom, whether they are themselves intellectually, morally, and aesthetically alive.
The interdisciplinary focus of our faculty has created a very great community of learners who aren't just curious about their thing or curious for the sake of being super smart about something, but actually want to give and contribute to a conversation that goes beyond just their discipline. I can talk with the Latin teacher about Dostoevsky. I can talk to our English teacher about why the canon is wonderful and what different parts of art he specifically appreciates.
People of high integrity, high moral character, and they encourage each other to continue that learning, because as an educator, our learning never stops.
As a public charter school network of academies in Texas, Arizona, and Louisiana, we are fortunate to have the freedom to hire teachers from all walks of life, whether they have an education degree or not.
I spent 10 years in the classroom before. Then I took 5 years off to do adult education, and I came back to elementary education 2 years ago. It's great to collaborate across grade levels and help find the beauty in our curriculum and help connect that beauty from grade to grade. It's been just an amazing experience working with those here at Great Hearts who are all on the same team, trying to guide this community to what's true, good, and beautiful.
The majority of our teachers have degrees in an academic content area. Engineering majors teaching physics, classicists teaching Latin or ancient history. It is our firm belief that the best and brightest in each academic field should consider teaching just as much as any graduate or professional pursuit.
My degree is in biochemistry and I have minors in math and global health, so I am teaching directly in my content area. And I think the main advantage to that is that I have a deeper understanding of the content that I'm working with. I really understand the why of what's happening with the problems that we're working through, and so I can give that deeper explanation to those students who are struggling. And then the students who are higher level, I can ask them deeper questions about the why so that they can gain that understanding that I maybe don't think I would have if I didn't have a degree in the content area.
Our teachers bring diverse talents and skills, whether in athletics,
We're going weave, go!
where we have a robust program of offerings,
Let's protect our children!
to other vital co-curricular programs such as the performing arts, impacting and developing the whole student. As an expanding network of schools, Great Hearts maintains rich professional development resources to support new teachers. Through robust curriculum and pedagogical courses, new faculty training, and ongoing professional development courses and coaching to strengthen even the most veteran teacher in their skills in the classroom. The network even offers support to teachers for graduate programs, tuition assistance, and special summer institute coursework.
One of the things that makes this particular job fulfilling compared to working at any other school is the amount of support and pouring into that they do with the staff. At other schools, they'll do more teacher-centric like strategy training during that time, which we certainly do, but they also spend a lot of time just enriching us as human beings. So not only am I a better teacher for having worked here, but I'm a better person. I'm a better wife, a better mother, a better friend, and it just fulfills me so much.
Join a network that places emphasis on the teacher's intellect and lifelong pursuit of learning through lively seminar conversations on great works of literature, poetry, art, history, and music. These formal yet intimate conversations enable our faculty to pursue truth together as a community of learners. This community becomes more than colleagues, friends, pursuing that which is noble.
The faculty seminar is actually one of the main reasons that I chose to work here at Great Hearts. To me, having a seminar as a staple part of professional development says that I care more than just about having an employee who has mastery of their skill, but also an employee that understands that the job of a teacher is not just to teach, it's also to learn.
The beauty of engaging with your academy and community, impacting the lives of children through your work, is an opportunity for true flourishing. As a member of a larger network, you will enjoy the benefits of excellent health coverage for you and your family, not to mention the possibility of future career pathways and leadership opportunities. And if you are a parent, the opportunity to enroll your own children in our schools and see them flourish through this classical liberal arts education.
Just as our students are passed down this beautiful classical education from generation to generation, I feel as though I have the opportunity to pass down my knowledge as a teacher from generation to generation.
Apply to teach with Great Hearts today. Begin a journey that will impact the lives of children in your classrooms, but will also indelibly form your own path towards the pursuit of what is true, good, and beautiful. Become a teacher at Great Hearts Academies. Apply today.
realm of classical liberal arts education, school leaders aspire to an extraordinary goal: fostering the human flourishing of entire communities. They impact the hearts and minds of students, teachers, and parents every day. For that reason, a leader must carefully attend to his or her own growth in order to further the good of all. As Epictetus states, one cannot pursue one's own highest good without at the same time necessarily promoting the good of others. Seeking the very best in ourselves means actively caring for the welfare of other human beings. Grounded in the philosophy and wisdom of the ages, APEX integrates management principles with a virtue-focused, Aristotelian-inspired curriculum. And all is accomplished through a highly flexible, self-paced set of assignments and sessions which are optimal for the full-time teacher or school leader.
The greatest strength of APEX for me was the union between the philosophical and the practical. The assignments and the readings were at once deeply rooted in what we believe about the human person, but also highly applicable to my daily work as a school leader.
Course designers aim to meet the professional development needs of all levels of school leader, whether that's an aspiring teacher or a veteran leader, with an array of courses from which to choose. Topics include change management, operationalizing vision, personal leadership, and many others. APEX can guide your leadership in whatever area you choose to explore, facilitated by veteran school leaders who act as guides through the readings, case studies, discussions, and practical yet reflective assignments.
I had a great experience facilitating an APEX course. My course, Hiring for Mission Fit, was not only good for me in my role as a leader at a classical school, but it was great for the participants from all over the country. We got together to discuss the important work of choosing the men and women that will ultimately work with our kids in our mission to provide a top-notch classical education.
We hope you'll join us on your journey towards school leadership. Visit our website at greatheartsapex.org to learn more about APEX, Program for School Leadership.
Videotaping this? Is that? Oh, yeah, that's definitely. All right.
At Great Hearts, our mission to pursue the true, the good, and the beautiful is really about human flourishing. The ability of our academies to help our scholars and our teachers flourish. Working in special education is a significant way to support that human flourishing in our students who need it most, to change the course of their education, to form their character and to shape their lives, and to see the way that they form and shape us.
Because our teachers are deep thinkers, the conversations around our students' unique needs are so rich and so meaningful. It allows us to not only differentiate instruction, but it also fosters a sense of belonging and empowerment for our students, and it enables us to be a highly responsive and effective team.
I was initially drawn to special education because I have a sister that was born with a developmental brain disorder. I watched my parents become extremely frustrated with the lack of education that was available to her. As a result, that drove my passion to become a special education teacher and teach children that I know all children can learn.
In Francis Sue's book, Mathematics for Human Flourishing, he writes that human flourishing is realizing one's potential and helping others do the same, of acting with honor and treating each other with dignity, of living with integrity even in challenging circumstances. The work of a special educator is difficult and beautiful, but at Great Hearts, this is what we strive for, and it changes the lives of our students and ourselves. We'd love for you to join us on this mission of human flourishing for students of all abilities.
They are cutting down the great plane trees at the end of the gardens. The loud common laughs of the men above it all.
Jack climbs the beanstalk, but has to find his own purpose as he ascends the hierarchy.
To ascend the ladder, we need a proper education to address and meet the highest aspirations of a human person, which is wisdom.
Symposium is a big classical education party because all of you come and dedicate 2.5 days of your lives to engaging with one another about what matters most to us as a community.
When I speak about how a liberal education can illuminate a life, I speak from personal experience. We were a typical Dominican immigrant family. When my mother lost her job, we didn't live paycheck to paycheck. We lived hand to mouth.
Things are so dire. Jack sells his cow or seed. A seed is a pattern without body. Find body and it will grow.
We teachers are the representatives of a culture, and the enemy of education is barbarism.
And he comes to the giant, representing the evils of hierarchy, the evils of tyranny, and now Jack has to deal with it, has to encounter it, has to confront it.
When I think about it, I think of my ancestors who told their story through songs like Go Down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell, O Pharaoh, let my people go.
The teacher's duty is thus to fight off that ever-present darkness by preserving and transmitting the heritage of freedom and virtue that has come to us from the past, but is always open to new insights and new community. I'd argue that it's the character of the teacher that is the best venue to the pursuit of truth.
The truth, by its nature, is effusive. Once discovered, it demands to be shared.
ganadocia convenientia sunt resonanda. Organadocia convenientia sunt resonanda.
He's lifted up into something higher.
Liberal education is liberating. We share a commitment. One might say we share a calling to broaden access to a life-transformative education.
Teachers engage all the students to use their voices more.
And so we come out of ourselves and our self-creation as postmodern creatures to the great tradition of Western culture.
When today's storytellers are saying our history is more marred by villains than illuminated by heroes, it's up to you to pass on the torch of culture, for without a vision, the people perish.
This is my story. This is my song.
Thank you. I'm afraid that video got lost in the sauce a little bit there, but my name is Jay Heiler. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Great Hearts. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Great Hearts National Symposium for Classical Education. Many of you have traveled here from great distances. Whether you hail from far or near, we're grateful you've made time to come and contribute to this annual gathering. We want you to find fun, edification, and companionship, three things which mark us out and join us together as human beings. And of course, we want you to find them amid the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty, three more things which only humans can know or long for. And therein lies the point of this work, the reason for what all of us do. We assert classical education as the highest and best form because it is that education most grounded in love and a transcendent regard for the human person. It is that education which counts and considers each soul as something dear and each life as something beautiful, if only we will honor it as such. This year as last, we gather amid expanding energy and interest around classical education, and that is a wondrous thing to see. Great Hearts began a few miles north of this spot in 2002 with 130 students in a leased church building. At that point, almost nobody knew what a classical education was, and almost nobody had access to one. That was 50 schools and about 30,000 students ago, and perhaps another 600,000 or 700,000 or so now being educated by all of you and by others who have joined in this work. That road to here and now has been built on the trust of parents. But more lately, our friends in the media have begun to join in heightened exploration around the subject, and we can expect that to continue. It seems that after that quarter century of work, and really after about 3,000 years, classical education has become an overnight success. In this new discussion of classical education, we now see it spoken of as a movement. At one point, I found myself referring to it in this way, but upon reflection, I would humbly submit that we retire the term. A few decades ago in America, there lived a well-known public intellectual by the name of Eric Hoffer. Most of you will not have heard much about him. This is an oversimplification, but think Jordan Peterson, but instead of a trained and astute Canadian psychologist, plug in a mid-20th century blue-collar, self-educated dock laborer in Los Angeles. Hoffer published several thin volumes well worth reading, including The True Believer and The Temper of Our Time. He was known as the longshoreman philosopher, and he was an occasional guest on the popular television talk shows of the day. Among his insights was that every great cause begins as a so-called movement, evolves into a business, and then quickly degenerates into a racket. 75 years on, we see a kind of movement inflation, perhaps media-driven, in which things are greatly accelerated. The business phase now is often skipped, and today things just go straight to racket while pretending to be a movement. In any case, we cannot allow classical education to devolve into anyone's racket. Further, we should consider that classical education is really not a movement at all. In fact, central to its assertion and its nature is a kind of unmovement, as in being unmoved by the latest fad or the next big thing or whatever the popular culture is next driven to raise up as an idol on the shores of modern life. But if classical education is not a movement, still less is it a mere remnant. It does not insist that we all pine for a saner past or huddle together in shelter from a darkening future. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Classical education consists in a confident claim about tomorrow, that our prospects are brightest when we're formed in a time-tested body of reason, experience, and insight, moral and practical, from age to age and from place to place, from achievement and triumph to tragedy and loss. St. Augustine, in his singular way, reduced it to 4 words: ever ancient, ever new. The Romans, in their way, conjured the point into one of their pagan gods, Janus, simultaneously looking both back and forward. This is where the month that ends and begins each new year, January, gets its name. The continued growth and definition and fruition of classical education stands on honest curation of humanity's past. But at stake is the sound and upright design and creation of its future. The holders of that stake are literally innumerable, and of course, most of them, we can hope, yet to be born. The cause is universal, and the inheritance holds a share for every soul. Our audacious purposes here are to make classical education the standard for the nation, and in due course, perhaps, for all nations. If we are to achieve that vision, our charge is clear. Deliver this cherished gift in faithful but varied wrappings, and give it in all places where parents and children await it. This is the great work that brings us here today, and all of us at Great Hearts are joyed to share in that work with all of you. Thank you. As we get this underway, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Jake Tawney, who, as many of you know, is our Chief Academic Officer at Great Hearts. He is both an esteemed academic leader and the best of friends, the best of fathers, the best of colleagues, and he is, along with his colleagues in our leadership team at Great Hearts, a daily source of inspiration to each one of us because of his own love for this work and his love for the family that the work is created to serve. So Jake joined us a number of years ago and has continued to evolve with time and to come to understand more and more the essential parts of leadership that a growing enterprise requires. And so he is now well beyond his early academic understandings and skill sets, and growing as all lifelong learners must grow, and as we intend them to grow through classical education. He is the living embodiment of that ethos. So Jake, he and his team are responsible for putting on this event every year. Carol McNamara, who many of you know and should get to know, holds frontline responsibility for that and has done an outstanding job in putting this event together in a loving and caring way for all of you. We are open to all constructive suggestions, criticisms, insults, anything that you would have to help us make this a better event every year for gathering, uplifting, and thickening the network of classical educators in the U.S. So with that, I introduce to you friend and colleague and Chief Academic Officer of Great Hearts, Jake Tawney.
Thank you, Jay. That has to be the kindest introduction for somebody whose job it is to then introduce. Again, my name is Jake Tawney. It does fall to me to both welcome you to this event, but also to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening. As I look out at this just marvelous crowd, I am reminded of 2017, when we launched our first symposium, where we had 63 teachers gathering in conference rooms and classrooms with 3 speakers to discuss classical rhetoric. And then in 2019, just a couple years later, we launched the first annual National Symposium for Classical Education held at the ASU Law Center, where we had 450 attendees. And we discussed reading instruction. I am just delighted with the crowd that is here this week in 2025, where we have nearly 850 attendees. We have 40 sponsors and well over 60 speakers. And we gather this year to talk about wonder and cultivating wonder, something that is near and dear to the heart of all classical educators. And I'm reminded very acutely, particularly with this year's theme, of the teachers who are in our crowd. So if we just quick show of hands, where are our teachers? While it is true that we are blessed with an audience of higher education folks, of sponsors, of publishers, of policymakers, we have to remind ourselves that in the end, classical education and this conference is for you, the teachers. You, every day, pour into the souls of the students, and you also deserve to have your souls poured into. So as we think about the notion of wonder, I challenge the audience, and I challenge in particular the teachers, to remember that classical education is for you and that wonder itself is a choice. Yes, we are here in Arizona, and the Grand Canyon is just a couple hours north of us, and we have those rare moments where wonder seems to bowl us over. But the normative way that wonder acts is as a choice. And so as we launch this symposium, as you hear Matthew Crawford's remarks tonight, as you hear the remarks of countless speakers throughout tomorrow, remind yourself to choose to wonder. Wonder being a choice is a lot like love. Love itself is a choice. And of course, the two are related, right? I love my wife insofar as every morning I wake up and decide to love her. And I also love her insofar as I stand in great awe and wonder of her. And I know she feels the same about me, because she often says, "Jake, I often wonder about you." And finally, teachers, as you choose to wonder, also remind yourself of what your vocation is. Because I am here to tell you in absolute certain terms that you are, to borrow a phrase from our keynote speaker's first book, you are soul crafters. You are not data scientists. You are not mere technicians. You are the crafters of souls. And that is a tremendously noble calling. With that, it is my just esteemed pleasure to introduce to you tonight's keynote speaker. Matthew Crawford is both a philosopher and a mechanic, or maybe a philosopher-mechanic. Currently also a fellow at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Culture at the University of Virginia. Matthew studied physics as an undergraduate and then the history of political thought, earning his PhD from the University of Chicago. His very well-known books include Shop Class for Soulcraft, The World Beyond Your Head, and Why We Drive. His shorter writings have appeared in First Things, The Wall Street Journal, The New Atlantis, The Hedgehog Review, Unheard, Compact, and at his Substack, Arcadelia. Tonight, presenting on gratitude and the modern condition, it is my great, great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Matthew Crawford.
Thanks very much, Jake. I've got a cold, and so I may start to sound like RFK Jr. at some point. I hope you'll just bear with me. So just an hour ago, Dan Scoggin was addressing a smaller crowd, trying to explain the spirit of Great Hearts Academy, and he invoked C.S. Lewis's magnificent essay, Men Without Chests, is in that little book, The Abolition of Man. And I knew right away that I was among friends. That's an essay that in part is about education as the education of the affections, coming to love the right things, having a proper order of loves. The theme of this conference is wonder. I'm going to be talking about gratitude, which I think is adjacent to wonder, and I hope that will become clear as I speak. We feel gratitude when someone does something for us outside the realm of exchange, and you want to market this arrival of something that overflows what's expected and recognize the source of it. In acting outside necessity, our benefactor shines. Or one may feel gratitude without a counterparty to accept it, in response to some fortunate condition that could have been otherwise. Having good health, for example, or good looks. Life itself, something for which we're not responsible, a gift. Whether in response to good fortune or to some identifiable benefactor, in taking note of this gift, one feels that one has regained a proper coordinate system. It's a calm feeling. One shucks off that irritable, constant background sense of not receiving one's due, the sense of a self inflated beyond its true proportions. For it does feel like a little dose of truth, this moment of reorienting, seeing oneself from the outside as one who receives rather than demands is also liberating from resentment, entitlement, grievance. You feel lighter as well as smaller, and more ready to act with grace toward others, that is, to be larger. For grace and gratitude have the same root, whether you're speaking etymologically or psychologically. I think our condition as modern people makes the experience of gratitude especially elusive. So when we feel grateful, it has an effect that is all the more powerful, bumping us out of a deep spiritual rut. And I think that's because it's an experience that can't be made sense of in a way that accords with the grand metaphysical picture that we live within most of the time. And if we can understand why this is so, I think it'll give us a critical vantage point from which to view our historical moment. It may also help us identify the source of our sourness and point the way towards something better. Most simply, gratitude requires that there be another, an outside world that is not under one's control and not of one's own making. Of course, it's simply the case that there is such a world, but there are different ways of responding to this fact. The English philosopher Michael Oakeshott wrote 2 essays which, if you put them side by side, offer a contrast between 2 personality types. One he called the rationalist, and the other he called the conservative. Now here, conservative doesn't refer to a political ideology. Instead, it names a disposition. What distinguishes the conservative is not hankering after the past, but rather affection for the present, for what actually exists. He has an eye for all the ways his surroundings afford a good life, or provide raw materials for the building of such a life. He wants to preserve the present world, not out of fearful, small-minded rejection of the possible, but because he has a keen awareness of the resources of the actual, which could be lost if we're not careful. In other words, he feels gratitude for the world and a sense of obligation to it. The rationalist, by contrast, looks at the world and is offended by the waste, the inefficiency, the chaos, the suffering, the grotesque failures of optimization, and wants to set it right. He has a vision of a better world, and that's where he lives, in devotion to his vision. Now, probably you need both types to have a healthy society. But in the present order, one of these types is full of confidence and speaks well into a microphone, while the other is apologetic and defensive. One has the wind of history at his back and is well capitalized. The other sometimes doubts his own sanity. Our own time has seen the emergence of a third type, the transhumanist, who's maybe just an over-the-top caricature of the rationalist. Like most caricatures, it brings into relief the defining features of the original through exaggeration. So I want to read a quote from a prominent transhumanist speaking to the British writer Paul Kingsnorth. He said, "I'd like to bring your attention to the issue with nature and biology that transhumanists have, that it's fundamentally flawed and likely even immoral to perpetuate, given its tendency to predation, disease, and death. Simply said, all nature and biology, from plants to wildlife to people, are something to be overcome and totally replaced with the synthetic. No one with even the slightest bit of compassion would ever create a world like ours, filled with so much suffering. It must all be undone and remade with technology, justice, and equality." So clearly, there's a theological point at issue here. It's not clear to me if this transhumanist is saying there is a creator and he's a real bastard, or there's no creator and nature itself is a real bastard. In any case, the so-called created order is no order at all, but a filthy and cruel chaos. He says it would be immoral to perpetuate. So, the transhumanist speaks as a moralist. He appears to be animated by what Nietzsche called ressentiment, which is the opposite of gratitude. In the Gnostic heresy, the world was created not by God, but by his evil twin, roughly. It needs to be rejected and overcome through human effort, and doing so requires special knowledge, gnosis, which is to be cultivated in a priestly class. This finds its equivalent in today's technocratic managers and moral visionaries of equality, aflame with a vision of life beyond suffering that will arrive when the givens of life are totally replaced with the synthetic, as our transhumanists put it. The point is to bring about salvation here in this world, Vogelin's famous immanentizing the eschaton, which is a real tongue twister. As many have noted, the transsexual ideology can be seen as a version of transhumanism, pungently named by Mary Harrington as meat Lego Gnosticism. From the beginning of the modern rationalist project, the body has been the thorn in the side of it. The creative freedom of the will is compromised by its entanglement with a body subject to natural necessities, not of one's choosing, what Kant called heteronomy. But if we reconceive the body as raw material, as meat Legos, and make man himself a technological project, then we can escape this subjugation to necessities that impinge from outside the will. But you don't have to look to the exotic fringe of transhumanism to see this. The whole movement of the present is to bring the world under rational control. For example, substituting algorithms and mechanized certainties for the frailties of human judgment, as in the push for driverless cars and whatnot. Or replacing the unclean clamor of democratic politics with expert administration. We may even take up this approach in relation to ourselves. For example, when we seek to eliminate the element of chance and serendipity in love through dating apps that, and here I have to use a computer voice, optimized through personalized search criteria and cross-platform social media integration. This isn't quite the madness of Eros, the divine folly, a consuming flame one's cast into by the god despite oneself, to be magnificently destroyed at the feet of one's beloved, giving thanks all the while from a heart that is glad. Compared to that, life on the dating apps looks like a half-life of prudish solipsism, however many orgasms it may yield. A life fully under control is a life of solitude, from which the possibility of serendipity has been excluded. Serendipity is perhaps the secular name for grace. The push for rational control has been with us for some centuries, but has lately entered an especially frantic phase and a jealous determination to leave no area of life untouched by this libido dominandi, this lust for control. Indeed, to trust in fate or divine providence or fortuna is to be downright irresponsible. It's not safe, for one thing. There's a fearful timidity to the rationalist soul. One way we try to bring the world under control is by substituting representations for reality itself. The difference is that representations are addressed to us. They're for us. They place each of us at the center of a little me world. Whereas dumb nature just sits there, indifferent to us. Nature is genuinely other, a real outside the self. Of course, we're inherently self-centered, quite literally. We inhabit bodies in particular places, and this gives rise to the spatial categories we use. One carves up the surrounding world along an axis of proximity and distance. The world within reach is the most salient to us. This idea of orientation around a bodily center helps us to see how the attentional environment that's emerged in contemporary culture is novel and somehow centerless. The basic concept at the root of attention is selection. We pick out something from the flux of the available. But as our experience comes to be ever more mediated by representations, which remove us from whatever situation we inhabit directly, as embodied beings who do things, it's hard to say what the principle of selection is. I can take a virtual tour of the Forbidden City in Beijing, or of the deepest underwater caverns, nearly as easily as I glance across the room. every foreign wonder and hidden place and obscure subculture is immediately available to my idle curiosity. They're lumped together into a uniform distancelessness that revolves around me. But where am I? There doesn't seem to be any non-arbitrary basis on which I can draw a horizon around myself, a zone of relevance, by which I might take my bearings and get oriented. When the axis of closer to me and further from me is collapsed, I can be anywhere and find that I'm rarely in any place in particular. To be present with those I share life with is then one option among many, and likely not the most amusing one at any given moment. It's hard to be grateful for loved ones when they keep interrupting my feed on YouTube. Accepting limits to one's reach and to the size of one's world may be necessary if one's to see the gifts that are at hand, if only one has eyes for them. I curse myself for every cheaply squandered opportunity to look into the eyes of my children with the fullness of attention that sees good. That's what's called love. Consider a different kind of attention, which likewise sees good. In a skilled practice, whether it's martial arts, music, or some craft practice, one enters into an ecology of attention in which one's perception is tuned to affordances that show up only within that practice. An affordance is a relation of fit between an agent and his or her environment, often mediated by some tool. These affordances are good in the narrow, pragmatic sense of being good for some purpose of the agent, not in an ethically laden sense. They provide the points of contact between the world and a human being who strives for excellence in his or her practice. They create the field of possibilities within which such striving is structured and given form. If we give due attention to the experience of skilled action, it can give us some critical distance on the ideal of autonomy. Consider music, for example. You can't be a musician without learning to play a particular instrument, subjecting your fingers to the discipline of frets or keys. The musician's power of expression is founded upon a prior obedience. Her musical agency is built up from an ongoing submission. To what? Well, to her teacher, maybe, but there is such a thing as the self-taught musician. Her obedience, rather, is to the mechanical realities of her instrument, which in turn answer to certain natural necessities of music. So, for example, if you half the length of a string under a given tension, it raises the pitch by an octave. These facts don't arise from the human will, and there's no altering them. Progress and excellence is only possible if one's capable of enduring a lot of tedium and frustration, practicing scales. I believe the example of the musician sheds light on the basic character of human agency, namely that it arises only within concrete limits that are not of our own making. These limits need not be physical. The important thing is rather that they're external to the self. Consider the experience of learning a foreign language, which was beautifully described by Iris Murdoch. She wrote, if I'm learning, for instance, Russian, I'm confronted by an authoritative structure which commands my respect. The task is difficult and the goal is distant and perhaps never entirely attainable. My work is a progressive revelation of something which exists independently of me. Attention is rewarded by a knowledge of reality. Love of Russian leads me away from myself toward something alien to me, something which my consciousness cannot take over, swallow up, deny, or make unreal. That's the end of the quote. In the Platonic tradition, one speaks of such striving as an erotic phenomenon. We're drawn out of ourselves toward beauty. I'm reminded of my friend Talbot Brewer's description of listening to Billie Holiday sing. She tries different phrasings in a given passage, combining them with subtle inflections of pitch, reaching toward some ideal that isn't fully clear to her as yet, as it comes into view only in the course of her pursuit of it, progressively. In rehearsal, presumably, but even during a performance in real time. To witness this from the audience is exhilarating. The beautiful thing we feel privileged to witness is the music itself, but also the presence of a human being engaged in this striving toward the music that wants to be born. Off stage, as it were, outside the focus of her own attention, which is entirely on the music, but visible to us from the audience, we see that she strives also toward a better version of herself, the one who has approached closer to the perfection of her art by pushing beyond the realm where she's certain of the outcome. You feel you're watching a high wire act. The risk of failure is intrinsic to the nature of play. And here I'm talking about the most serious kind of play, such as music or sport. In his indispensable book, Homo Ludens, Johann Huizinga convinces us that in play lie the origins of civilization. He writes, to dare, to take risks, to bear uncertainty, to endure tension, these are the essence of the play spirit. Thus understood, play sits uncomfortably with the contemporary taste for order and our attempts to bring the world fully under rational control. One way we do that, again, is by filtering reality through representations. Let me illustrate this with an example from children's television. In the old Mickey Mouse cartoons from the early and middle decades of the 20th century, you still get a depiction of the world in which reality has some stature of its own. By far the most prominent source of hilarity is the capacity of material stuff to generate frustration, or rather demonic violence. So, like the roll-up blinds, that gather you up and pull you in, or the overwound grandfather clock that grabs you by the collar. If Goofy is towing a trailer, you definitely don't want to be anywhere near that on a mountain road. You get the idea. The tendency of things to thwart the human will is exaggerated, and through exaggeration, a certain truth gets brought forward. The slapstick sufferings of Donald Duck acknowledge, and thereby seem to affirm, the human condition as it is, beneath the various idealisms that would transport us out of that condition. The Disney cartoon franchise now has many departments. One of them, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse on the Disney Junior Network, retains the same characters as those old school ones. But the difference in how material reality is presented could not be more stark. And in this difference, a shift in the relation between self and world becomes evident as well. There's one episode where there's a strong wind blowing, and I guess Goofy starts to get blown away by the wind, and the paving stone moves aside, and there's a retractable hand that comes out of the paving stone and grabs him and gently pulls him back down to the earth. The clubhouse is filled with amazing technology that always works perfectly. Each episode is built around solving some problem. One does this by saying, "Oh, Toodles, this makes the handy-dandy machine appear. It's a computer-like thing that condenses out of the cloud and presents a menu of 4 options on a screen, by the use of which the viewer is encouraged to be a mousecadeur. There are 4 problems per episode, and each can be solved using one of the 4 tools. This assurance is baked into the initial setup of the episode. No moment of helplessness is allowed to arise. There's never an insoluble problem, that is, a deep conflict between the will and the world. I suspect that's one reason why these episodes are not just unfunny, but somehow the opposite of funny. What we're watching is the substitution of manufactured experience for a direct encounter with the world. With this comes the construction of a more fragile kind of self, and a more manipulable one. He makes things happen in the world by pressing a button, which means that his will has been channeled into some choice architecture that's been constructed for him by unknown others. To be a mousecadeur is to abstract from material reality as depicted in those early Disney cartoons, where we see the flip side of affordances. Perhaps we should call unwanted projectiles, demonic springs, and all such hazards negative affordances. The thing is, you can't have the positive without the negative. They're 2 sides of the same coin. The world in which we acquire skill as embodied agents is precisely the world in which we're subject to the frustrations of things, the hazards of material reality. To pursue the fantasy of escaping this through abstraction is to give up on skill, and therefore to substitute technology as magic for the possibility of real agency. So how does any of this bear on the question of gratitude? Affection for the world as it is could be taken as the motto of a this-worldly ethics. There are, in addition to the slapstick, moments of real physical grace in those old Disney cartoons. When Donald Duck is skating in a frozen lake in one episode, he recruits overhanging branches and snowdrifts, incorporating their affordances into a ballet-like performance in which he's able to do amazing things. His skating is amazing, but not fantastical or magical. It's a heightened version of what you admire when you watch a real skater. Again, this is the old early 20th century cartoon. To watch it is to be surprised and delighted by the real. At such moments, the possibilities for beautiful human action in the world as it is, the undiscovered possibilities of fit, seem inexhaustible. This can inspire wonder and gratitude. Intuitions we associate with religion are available within a this-worldly ethics of attention. For kind of courage, it's that of entrusting oneself to that which has not been made by oneself and never could be made, but which supports and makes possible all of our making and doing. If we call such entrusting faith, notice that it has the same spirit as play, to dare, to take risks, to bear uncertainty. I like the example of surfing because the ocean is something truly alien and inscrutable. The surfer throws himself into it. Every wave is unique, a gift that can never recur, and they're exquisite. The surfer receives it and does what he can with it. Rarely does he feel adequate to its possibilities. He's not in the right spot when it arrives due to a failure of paddling strength. Or if he does catch it, he doesn't adequately perceive what this particular wave is going to do, and he botches it. Or he has a failure of courage if the wave is big and murderous, and he hesitates. Surfing is 95% frustrated eros, for me at least, due to my own limitations. But that other 5%, to watch a Kelly Slater is to be forced to recalibrate one's sense of what a human being can do. So there's one data point, surfing. Another would be, quite simply, the existence of women's breasts. If you want proof that there is a God and he loves us very much, I think that's really all you need. The accusation against religion is that it removes us to a different, invisible realm, and it's for that reason corrupting. But sometimes you have an experience of God's love saturating this world, and it's essentially psychedelic. You feel you're gaining perceptual access to the most fundamental layer of reality, the ground of grounds. Quite preposterously, this turns out to be something like love. The effect of such moments is to place you more fully in the actual. With this comes a renewal of our faculty of gratitude. For I do believe it is a faculty, one of those endowments by which a person grasps his true situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I had, I think 4 people bring me water to bring up to you during that speech, so I finally delivered it. We are going to take Q&A, and we have a couple microphones here, so we would invite you to come forward to the microphone with a question. And as you're doing that, and as you're lining up, maybe I will just get us started, Matthew. So it's a really great talk. It's a big question I'll start us off with, but I'm curious, as you think about gratitude, for whatever reason, several of the examples you were giving brought this to mind. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the relationship between gratitude and piety.
Yeah, great question. Well, I think there is such a thing as natural piety. Isn't that even a phrase? I've heard that somewhere. Right. So maybe we could say that piety depends on a keen awareness that there is something, some entity that how to finish that sentence? I'm struggling with some entity that is awesome in the literal sense. I'm trying to work my way toward this specific feeling that entity, the basic character of it is love. And gratitude is connected to that intuition, that there's some kind of benevolence just in the world. I mean, with those examples of surfing and ice skating and stuff, I was trying to capture the wondrous quality of the everyday stuff in the world that somehow it seems to support amazing human activities and the sort of reaching toward new excellences all the time, and it's astonishing.
Thank you. Check. It's working. Thank you so much for your talk. I spent hours watching Mickey Mouse Funhouse with my kids, and you helped diagnose the peculiar pain I experienced.
Isn't it creepy?
It's incredibly creepy. It is one of the most dreadful things. I really appreciated that, probably the most of your talk. But I think following up on the first question is, to what extent does gratitude presuppose God? Is God necessary for us to be grateful? And then the second question is, how do you cultivate gratitude personally? What counsel? And it was certainly implied deeply in your talk, but as you think about, many of us are teachers and parents, and we're trying to encourage our students to be grateful. And so just wondering about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, right, I guess obviously one could be grateful to another person without bringing in positing a God, I suppose. That's just sort of everyday low to the ground gratitude. Once you start talking about something like gratitude for life, well, then it seems like if life is good and it's a gift, I mean, you didn't do it, then that seems to suggest there's a God, a creator. I mean, so I guess I'll put my cards on the table. I am a recent convert to Christianity. I was just baptized about a year and a half ago. Thanks. So this way of thinking is new to me, but I think there were intimations of it in my previous books. But yeah, God, for sure. Oh, but then the second question. I mean, this could be a lot simpler. I should just shut up. Practical advice, boy, if you have some, please let me know. Because I think maybe most people, despite my objective good fortune, gratitude does not come easily. It's like I have to keep coming back to it.
So I'm curious why you think that is, because I think that is a common experience. There are times when gratitude itself seems, it's a little like my comment about wonder, right? Where it seems to happen to us. We feel these tremendous moments of gratitude. But then there are times where it does feel like we have to remind ourselves to exercise that, right? Why is that? What is the difference in cause? What is the difference in experience between, I don't want to say those two forms of gratitude, but maybe at least just those two experiences of gratitude?
Yeah, I was struck by that parallel too when Jay was talking about choosing wonder. Yeah. Right, it's like there's some kind of switch that flips from, I think it's a kind of decentering of the self. And I tried to suggest at the beginning, it's like you see yourself from the outside as one who receives, rather from the inside as one who demands and is never getting everything you want. I don't know, would it, maybe, I don't have any advice that doesn't just sound like a Hallmark card or something. But it sounds like you might have a thought on this.
Well, I wonder if it has something to do with where we experience gratitude most when we know we're being given something, right? And then most profoundly when we know that another self is giving of the self. And there are times when that's just blatantly obvious. And so gratitude just sort of washes over us. But then there are times where we have to remind ourselves that whatever it is that we have, whatever it is that we experience, maybe isn't ours and is the cause of another and another gift. And that's that reminder. So somehow gratitude comes from a recognition of another giving of the self. And so sometimes that's obvious and sometimes it's not. That wasn't a question, I guess.
No, that was a contribution. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. I'll start with my short version of my question and maybe throw a few thoughts. The short version is, what's the distinction between art and craft? This is something I've been wondering for a while, and in your talk tonight you brought up surfing, music. I've read shop classes, Soulcraft, and how these things bring us out of ourselves. You've talked about Eros tonight, and then I wonder with taking like athletics, even something then like gymnastics or let's say CrossFit today, right? Do these things take us outside of ourselves in the way these examples you've brought up tonight do. And yeah, so I guess that's my question. Is there a distinction between art and craft? And could that help us think through some of this? Thank you.
Yeah. Right, so, you mentioned, I'm trying to remember, before CrossFit, you mentioned something. Gymnastics, yeah, I like that one better. Yeah, obviously this is like an art form that is developed to extremely high level. I guess I've never gotten too hung up on the distinction between art and craft. I mean, obviously you have a kind of artsy-fartsy, mindset that often people speak as though the whole point of it is self-expression rather than mastering, the craft of art. So I was once in Barcelona, went to the Picasso Museum, and it's organized by floors, so chronologically. And on the bottom floor is his earliest period, and it looks like, it's not Picasso, it looks like old Dutch masters and just like technically superb. So in other words, before he became Picasso, he mastered the forms. And I think that's, to me, the most impressive art is representational art that captures something real. I was once in the National Gallery in DC, and there was a sculpture of a hand by Rodin just in a case. And this hand was more alive than my own hand as I held it in front of me. There's something mysterious that sometimes happens with art that I don't understand.
Let's stick for that a little bit. One of the things you mentioned in your talk, Matthew, was the appreciation, the gratitude that we have for the good can come from our experience of the opposite of evil, right? So when we think about classical education, we often hear the phrase truth, goodness, and beauty. We uphold the idea of surrounding students with objective works of beauty. And you've spoken just now about that experience with those objective works. Whether we're talking about art or literature or something else, what is the role of ugliness in education?
Well, I think one effect of education, I mentioned this at the beginning, is a training of the affections and coming to love the truly lovable. And that's connected to the process of becoming less vulgar. I think it was Harvey Mansfield said that what it means to be vulgar is to be unacquainted with beautiful things. And I think, not just like you never laid eyes on, but somehow haven't cultivated the kind of response that is adequate to the object. So, and I don't know about you, but I'm embarrassed at the things I loved and thought beautiful, when I was a teenager or something. So there is a process of maturation there. So maybe the role of the ugly is you can pick it out retroactively as, I don't know. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Mr. Austin?
I'm not sure it does.
I was thinking about the question of gratitude for the world as it is. There are things that are hard to feel grateful for. Pain. I can imagine being grateful for that pain, which is the process of growth. Exercise has some fruit at the end, and so I can feel the gratitude for the pain itself. But the pain of decay feels harder to feel grateful for. I wondered if you could reflect on that for a few minutes.
Yeah. And it seems like that contrast you just offered is kind of like the contrast between the task of loving a child, which can be there's a lot of grunt work and, it's a lot of work versus the task of loving, and someone with dementia who's on their way out, and just how hard that is. Because I guess with a child you feel like you're filling her up, you're bringing her more fully into herself. Is there a comparable? How should one approach caring for someone who's on their way out? Do you have to posit an afterlife to be able to kind of give yourself some sense of purpose in that? Maybe it can just be memory and gratitude, especially if they, cared for you when you were little. I don't know.
There appeared to be a significant amount of 18th and 19th century German philosophers in your talk. Could you unpack the relationship between German existentialism and why that has, I think, such a pull on our present moment?
Hey man, who let you in here?
You're the one who quoted Kant. That's all I'm saying.
I cut out the part where I quoted Heidegger, so I'm glad I did. German existentialism. Okay. I think I can get us there. Here, how's this? So I've just been teaching a seminar on Nietzsche and his genealogy of morals, where he lays out this idea of ressentiment. In fact, I used the word. He uses the French word for resentment. It just has slightly different resonances. And Nietzsche finds ressentiment to be the sort of secret inner truth of Christian love. In other words, he calls Christianity a slave morality. And I think, I've come to think he's completely wrong about that, but it's still an invaluable and fascinating kind of moral psychology that he lays out there. So it does, and one thing he points out is that ressentiment is contagious. And it has a kind of cultural logic to it, and can become the dominant sort of political morality of a time. And I think we have been in a time of accelerating ressentiment. I think a lot of the identity politics stuff was rooted in that. But it also kind of feels like something has broken in a healthy way very recently. And that maybe this will have less of a grip on us. I don't know.
Is this going to be about German existentialism or Mickey Mouse's Funhouse?
I hope neither, but I'll have to wait and see what I say. Well, thank you very much for your talk. It was a pleasure to listen to. And I don't know how you do it under those lights. It's a lot of pressure being on this microphone, let alone that one.
I can't see your face at all.
Probably for the best. So my question was, generally, why you thought gratitude was important to talk about tonight. My fear in hearing your talk was that gratitude could lead to this quietism, where authority figures of the left or the right, or just even local ones that you happen to know, might preach gratitude to you as a way to quiet down legitimate complaints and to keep injustice in place. And you seem to point out in your talk at the very beginning, with your quote of Michael Oakeshott, the rationalist and the conservative, that there was a balancing act at work here that was needed to happen. And I wondered why you thought gratitude was important tonight and how you would properly balance gratitude out so it didn't become a tool used by authority figures to keep legitimate complaints from rising.
Yeah, I guess my own sense is that the kind of prevailing mode of political manipulation has been not kind of enjoining people to be grateful as a way to kind of make them content with their lot, but rather stoking resentment that is sort of unsatisfiable. So I don't hear a lot of talk of gratitude in a sort of demagogic mode. Maybe certainly what you say is in principle, I could imagine that, but it doesn't. I don't think that's our problem.
I'm not going to be asked the same question about which side Mickey Mouse. No, I'm actually going to go in a different direction. I loved your quote about the idea of having an eye for today and focusing eye for today, the I idea of being present, and then thinking about nature and biology. And I'm wondering if there is a call to have a sense of place of where we are. And I think of your imagery of you saying, we can go explore any cave in the world, we can go deep into the ocean. But if there's not, we are losing the wonder of where we are in our own environment and in our own world, and not able to walk outside and say, wow, that's an incredible bird or whatever, this thing that's happening in this space. And I wonder if there's some piece of gratitude in the natural world of wherever we are, pausing, stopping, seeing, that needs to be, specifically in education, that needs to be identified or constructed with in a very deliberate way. And if that begins a journey on gratitude for other things. So both gratitude for the things that are around us, and maybe that'll lead to the people around us, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like this suggestion, sort of being alive to a particular place, truly inhabiting it. I mean, only if you kind of stay put for a while, a good while, do you kind of come to know a place and be capable of loving it, I think. And of course, American society for centuries has been a place of picking up and moving west or onwards. So there's a kind of, I think we're a people who's always feel displaced to some degree, and I think that's going to become more so the case, sort of mobility, which has obvious benefits, mobility, but it can, to be a rootless cosmopolitan is to deny oneself certain, it's almost like an existential, like being at home. And I think we miss that. I think we have a kind of hankering for that. And that's, of course, that can take the form of nostalgia. And I'm kind of pro-nostalgia. I don't think it's as bad as it's made out to be.
I was struck by the same thing. I think what Heidi's talking about, maybe getting at, that when you're talking, Matthew, about the loss of a sense of place because of the virtual experiences that students have, right? I also think of loss of place. We had some new friends from North Carolina in town. They're out there somewhere, and we were driving them to one of our schools earlier today. And I love Phoenix, but we were driving on a particular stretch where you're passing the same strip mall that can be found in virtually any town in America. And so there's also that loss of sense of place. Do you think we can draw a line? I mean, on the one hand, they seem very different. One is a technological reality, one is a commercial reality. But can we draw a line between, is the technological thing just the fruition of this loss of place that's happening? What's the connection there between those two things?
Well, I mean, so you mentioned like driving past the strip mall, and you could be in any Southwest city, or any. So there's a homogenization is the problem. There's a kind of erasure of place that takes place, not within you because you keep moving around, but rather the actual place gets erased in the churn of real estate development. And So you've probably heard that phrase. I think it was Edith Stein, who said of Oakland that there's no there there. And I learned recently that she said that she grew up in Oakland, and she was living in New York and came back, like hadn't been there for 30 years, and she found the place unrecognizable. It had been transformed, and so that's the feeling of loss, because our memories get attached to particular places. But yeah, I think there is some kind of affinity clearly between the sort of constant erasure of place physically and the technological sort of availability of so much to us without any kind of proximity versus distance kind of criterion of relevance, that sometimes it feels like you're kind of dissolving into the ether.
Thanks for a really thought-provoking talk. Have you thought much about humor? I was thinking about it when you were talking about sort of the rationalistic character of our age. We want to eliminate chance, and that also means we want to eliminate spontaneity. You gave a funny talk, and I think that somehow laughter seems to be connected with gratitude, wonder, and maybe even have sort of theological dimensions. I mean, look, you made a joke about women's breasts, right? And of course,
that was very sincere.
Right. Now you got to laugh. See, when you said it, people are like, oh, should I laugh at that? Now I laughed because I don't give a damn. But the point is that why have comedians been attacked in our era? Why have comedians been attacked? Because when somebody makes a joke and people laugh, that's an expression of spontaneity. And we're told, like, you're not supposed to laugh at that. Well, what the hell am I supposed to do if someone's funny? So, like, you set this thing up, right? And I think that, I'm just wondering, is laughter like an expression of gratitude? At like wonder, like, did he say that? Did he really just say that? And I don't know, it's kind of deep. I mean, there is a theological dimension, I think, but tell me what you think.
I'd rather just listen to you, Jake.
All right, let me continue.
I think, what makes something funny, there's usually some element of surprise in it, like some expectation gets set up and then inverted, and that's the punchline, right? So it seems like it's connected to wonder in that sense, that it kind of derails us in some really pleasurable way, right? It's pleasurable to laugh. And so you're talking about the kind of attempted clamp down on comedy, like over the last 10 years or something. Like the funniest guy on the planet, Louis C.K., right? Gets canceled. What a disaster. But he's back. And what were we talking about? All right. There's people behind you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Jake.
I just want to do a quick time check because I did not bring a watch up here. Carol, how are we doing? Okay, we'll do a few more. I do want to go on record and say, I do believe by my count, this is the third opening keynote at a symposium that has mentioned sex. I don't know what that means about the symposia we run, but we're getting some applause from the front row. We'll take just a few more quick ones here before we wrap up.
Thank you so much for your talk, and I've really enjoyed sort of the sequence of questions. And perhaps I hope I'm not overstating or asking the obvious, but it seems to me when we discuss place, it's necessary to discuss time. I was reflecting on the earlier question about how do we practically bring this into our classroom, or how do we work on building gratitude, way back, maybe second question. And I kept thinking about a colleague whose wife was recently diagnosed with cancer and has young children, and he talks about how grateful he is because of the wake-up call. So much like the previous comment about the comedy, this idea of being something that forces us into the present moment, not just physically, but in a sense of the span of time, how easy it is to live in the past or the future, and how we do that in our classrooms by making things alive.
Yeah. Right. Well, there's the old dictum, memento mori, remember your death, which puts things in perspective. And now I'm remembering, there was I think this is connected to your point, someone was saying, what kind of strategies can you have for feeling grateful? I'm remembering now that I actually came up with one, or just hit me, which is, I'm often anxious and, like, just, not inhabiting my own life in the kind of settled, joyful way that it seems like would be possible. And when I feel that way, sometimes I'll imagine the present as imagined by my younger self in the past. So if me of 10 years ago could see what my life looks like now, he would probably say, hey, that's pretty good. That's not bad. And so that perspective helps me recognize my good fortune.
I'm going to do just one more question.
So I really appreciated your talk, and one thing that I noticed was when you talked about taking risks and how that's related to like the importance of failure. And so I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on how can we feel grateful for our failures and how can we teach our students to feel grateful for failure when so often it feels like they want to stay in the predictable, they want to stay in the safe zone, and failure doesn't feel fun. And yet I could sense that the way that you were talking about it, that's where we come alive. So.
Yeah, I guess so. You're talking about a kind of risk averseness, yeah, and famously, people who teach college are always saying that kids these days are so risk averse, and you see, and I think that their sort of social statistics bear that out, that they're real safe, but how to encourage it? I guess. I don't know, just if there's some way to sort of lower the stakes or maybe you can encourage a kid to, just think of this as a practice run. And most of the time it fails, but just go ahead and try it out and just to get a feel for it. I don't know, if you can trick yourself into thinking this is just like a preliminary practice run test, then that does lower the stakes. I find that helpful. So, great. So which raises the question: why if kids are risk averse now, do they feel like everything is going on their permanent record or something? It does seem to be. Maybe it's because of the sense of surveillance, right? We're so surveilled, you don't want to screw up or do stupid stuff. It'll just, it's searchable in perpetuity. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
Well, I'm tempted to say something like, speaking of gratitude, we are grateful, but it all sounds like a Hallmark card. So I simply will say thank you. And it is my pleasure to close us out for the night to give you Dr. Carol McNamara, the director of the Great Hearts Institute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for your attendance and for everyone being here. I won't say very much because you've been listening to people speak all afternoon and all evening, but I do have some sort of housekeeping matters that I want to make sure that we share with you. First of all, Wi-Fi. I think everybody has, I'm hoping that everyone has downloaded the app already, the Wi-Fi already, accessed the Wi-Fi. Our Wi-Fi this year at Symposium is graciously sponsored by the Pro-Human Foundation, and that's why, interestingly enough, the password, it's the Great Hearts National Symposium is the Wi-Fi name, and the password is sponsored by Pro-Human. I know that's somehow fitting after our recent keynote. Please, if you haven't already, download the app so that you can sign up for sessions and receive messages from us, and you can access the map and all of the information about Symposium. I want to encourage all of you to visit the sponsor halls and to interact with and meet all of our sponsors. The generous support of all of our sponsors makes Symposium possible, and they also provide a great deal of value. They bring a lot of information and a lot of interactions that I think are really important and enhance the character and the quality of our Symposium. Also, I want to emphasize, I'm not sure if anyone has noticed yet, that we have the 8th Day booksellers here, and they're in the corner of the courtyard. And Mark Bauerlein, one of our speakers, came up to me and he said, I want to challenge everyone to go into 8th Day Books and to go home with a book. So I hope you all will. We really also appreciate that 8th Day Books travels all the way to Arizona to sell books and to order all the books of all of our speakers to provide that for you. So please visit them and visit our sponsors. Tomorrow morning we'll meet again here at 8:30 for our keynote, for our Thursday morning keynote speaker, Sir Jonathan Bate, and his talk will be Shakespeare and the Classics. Sir Bate is Regents Professor of Literature and Foundation Professor of Environmental Humanities at Arizona State University and a Senior Research Fellow at Oxford University. I also want to thank everyone for their patience with us this afternoon. It was something of an experiment for us to have Wednesday afternoon sessions, and I know that they were overflowing, and I am grateful for your attendance and for making that experiment successful, and next year we'll have a lot more sessions, so thank you for your patience. Finally, not finally, but next to the last, I want to thank the Great Hearts Institute team. There'll be lots of time for thank yous at the end of Symposium, but the Great Hearts Institute team, Annie Matsuda, Jennifer Richter, Isha Kubafat, and our tireless interns, Shannon McQuitty and Ryan Sheldon. I want to thank them for their long hours and dedication in putting this event together. I just want to thank them early and often and at the end as well. And finally, I want to invite you all to join us in the courtyard with the palm trees and lots of food and music for our reception. So please join us, visit the keynote, visit the sponsors, visit the bookseller, and join us for food and beverages. Thank you again to our keynote speaker, Matthew Crawford, and I look forward to seeing you all out in the courtyard.